Dr. Johnson, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. Hope the same for you.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Let's talk about quiet quitters because I think some might think at first blush these are just slackers, people who don't want to work hard. That's not the case, is it?
That's actually not the case. Quiet quitters are typically individuals who were high achieving. They came in, wanted to make a change, have worked extremely hard, and then hit a wall, and then slowly begin, or sometimes quickly, to find
Hmm.
an exit.
Walk us through some of the underlying reasons then that people are quiet quitting.
Yeah. If we take a look, especially now, since it's something that's so prevalent, this is still part of the fatigue, the stress, the accumulation, the burnout of being in the pandemic and recognizing what is really important, recognizing how you may have been treated during that time, or even trying to go back and reintegrate into a place that isn't the same. Sometimes people at the top are making big, tough decisions that we understand, but not recognizing how every time you make a change, a
Hmm.
shift in a season where people have already been overwhelmed by uncertainty, they also don't feel comfortable in a setting anymore and like they can regulate and feel is a place that they want to be.
You describe it as think of it as fight or flight, right? In some cases, right? And I think most people think of that as something that's like a physical risk that I'm facing, right? Now, those are my options, but it works in this realm as well.
Absolutely, because neurobiologically, which means from our brain down to our body, we are constantly taking in information. So it's going to be a physical and an emotional reaction if you are used to being in an environment that felt light and cheerful and welcoming and collaborative. And then all of a sudden, there were shifts made, people are gone, but no one's talked about it. There's been no repair. Responsibilities have shifted. And you walk in and the space is different. It's quiet. So fight, flight, or freeze, you either kind of focus in and just do what you need to do, you disconnect, or you decide, I don't like this anymore. This doesn't feel healthy. This isn't a place that I want to be. So it's physical, psychological, and a little bit emotional.
That's important for people to recognize this, right? Because, like I said at the very top, right? Some people might just think it's somebody doesn't want to work hard. No, there's actually an emotional response that's happening here. Touch on that some more.
Yeah. So when you think about our ability to emotionally regulate, we also do what's called co-regulate, which means the people in our environment play a big role in our ability to be comfortable. If you have a team of people and you have the one person that maybe they didn't wake up on the right side of the bed and they're a little tense, everyone starts to feel that if you've ever been in a meeting that way. Well,
Hmm.
if that's not appropriately addressed and that person kind of feeds off of, I can come in and bully a dynamic or a situation, then people start to become apprehensive as they go in and become a part of that environment. So then this person who's normally quiet is even more quiet and reserved and isolated. This person who normally doesn't say much feels like, well, I want to change the scene and I'm going to be more defensive. And so all of a sudden, you have a dysregulated environment because the system in place doesn't really do a lot to make sure that you know how to respect each other or work together well. And those skills cannot be assumed.
I think a lot of people might assume then that means just changing jobs is going to solve all this, does it?
Unfortunately, that is what a lot of people believe, and it doesn't. Part of what I mentioned in an article that I wrote
Yeah.
was people will take those same dynamics and go to a different place. So let's say that you're in a work environment and you don't feel valued.
Hmm.
There were changes, and all of a sudden you're now doing what was told versus having the ability to decide things for yourself. We believe if I go in this new environment, then everything's going to be better. But there's going to be a part of you that's still holding on to how you were treated. We have this saying in trauma and psychology that the body keeps the score, which
Mm.
means the next time that you get back in a dynamic that feels similar or someone says something that's similar, there's going to be a part of you that may feel, is this happening again? And everything in your body is telling you that it is. And you might become more defensive or more of an advocate unnecessarily for yourself because you're trying to keep yourself from experiencing the same thing that happened in the last place.
So, employee to employee, our coworkers, are there things that we can kind of do to support each other through this?
Being open and honest with each other, I think, is going to be extremely helpful. But even more than that, learning how important it is to be respectful, to an individual, giving each other the benefit of the doubt when we do see this is outside of their normal character. One of the things that I encourage us to always ask someone, even if we feel taken aback by the way that they're acting, is,
Mm.
hey, is everything okay? Right? Starting off with just a simple question like that really brings things down before you go to the defense to say, what's happening here? Is there something going on with this person that I'm aware of? And then we have a responsibility as the employee to be honest and go, I'm sorry. That came
Yeah.
off a little bit more aggressive than I intended it to. I'm really not doing well today.
Talk about employers. Are they sort of missing the mark at times because they're not thinking of this maybe in the way that you're talking about? They might be thinking, oh, if I just give them a 3% pay raise, that'll make this all go away.
Yeah, in truth, I feel like a lot of employers are in one of two places, multiple places, but we'll summarize. One is they are so overwhelmed with all of the dynamics that they're trying to manage between, the dollars, the dogma, and all of the different dynamics of, are we doing well? Are we meeting these numbers? Do we have enough people, that the whole concept of creating a culture of well-being can get lost in translation. Then we have another school of leadership or employers that may also feel, well, when I was growing up and when I was working, these were separate situations. Nobody had to beg me to come to work. No one had to be nice to me. I came in and I did a job because that was my responsibility. So then there's a disconnect around the reality of, you were the silent generation and that may have worked, it didn't, but may have
Mhm.
worked in your mind for that generation. But the needs of this work generation are different. So they're just completely unaware of the changing dynamics.
So how do they start those conversations then, with their employees?
You want to have them start essentially with doing something that is going to be anonymous. If it's a place that's dysregulated or they've seen the repercussions of people who've tried to be honest and truthful. For example, going back to those quiet quitters, a lot of them gave symbols and signs that things weren't okay. They said, we're overworked, we're understaffed. I understand why you want us to do things this way, but here are some other things to consider, and they weren't heard and that wasn't validated. So you want to give them an anonymous way to answer questions that are honest and truthful, and then from there really allow that data to drive your decision making versus your subjective opinion as an employer.
So this can be solved. This can be dealt with on some level.
It can be solved, it can be dealt with, but it's also important to know it's not easy, because for a lot of individuals, it's going to be uncomfortable. And not just necessarily employee to employee, but it could mean making some big changes or having to acknowledge that as an employer, that what I think may not actually be what's best.
So if you're seeing a lot of turnover in your office or your place of employment, this may be the reason why.
For sure. You want to ask questions. You think about the cost, not only just financially, but in terms of quality. Every time there's a turnover, there is a period of, you have to find the right person, they have to reintegrate with the team. Recent data says that when you lose one person, it could be up to
Mhm.
$50,000 to $70,000 per person, regardless of what that person makes, because you also have to consider training, time that you
Sure.
spent trying to get them acclimated, and then if they stay, and then starting that process over again. But high turnover is a number one sign that your work culture is not okay.
You need to examine it and consider some changes. We
Yeah.
just scratched the surface. I appreciate you talking to us, Dr. Sharice Johnson. We'll make sure everybody got a link to check out the full article that you've written on this.
Thank you so much for bringing the conversation to the table.